says there that I'm from Houston, Texas. I mean, that is true. I study there. I've been living there for about 10 years now. So that's true, but I mean, that's not where it began. I was born in a town in South Texas called Los Fresnos, and I lived there the first 11 years of my life. I have a family of two other brothers. My older brother actually got to live there for 14 years, so he's definitely more of a native there. My little brother, he only got to live there up till he was 7 years old. To him, Houston is his only home. So that's why I feel like I have two homes right now. And, growing up in South Texas, it was just a different world than what you see in Houston, Houston, it's a big city. I think it's the fourth largest city in the United States. So over here, it was just completely different. I got to see people from different skin colors, different races, and even people from all different parts of the world. Stuff that in Los Fresnos I never saw. I mean, honestly, in Los Fresnos, I only saw people that looked like me. And that's basically, yes, my town. I loved. I do remember a lot of it from over there. It was the proximity to Mexico. You would visit Mexico very often, Matamoros. This was before, it was as violent as it is now. But my life there, in South Texas was completely different than it was here in Houston. And now that I moved to Houston, it's been, a little bit more, like high school, middle school years and college years. But yeah, that's basically where it began, in Los Fresnos, Texas.
Could you describe more about your neighborhood and, how was it living in Los Fresnos in Texas? Could you describe the town for us?
Yes. Well, Los Fresnos is a small town. It's like I want to say like 30, 40 minutes from Brownsville. It's about 90 miles north of the border. I lived in my neighborhood. I guess many people would consider it to be poor. I really didn't see it as poor because it was the only world that I knew of. People around me were the same, but the houses were there were small houses, small neighborhood, kind of like standard neighborhoods like the ones they have in Houston, but there was much more space. And just because it was a small house, we just had a lot of space. Growing up in the neighborhood, everybody knew each other. That's just the culture there. Like, who your neighbor is. Who the person living in front of you is. Everybody just knew each other. I just thought that was like normal part of any neighborhood culture. But after I moved to Houston, it wasn't that way. I mean, now that I've been living in my neighborhood for a couple of years now, I don't even know I know who my neighbor is, but I don't even talk to them. It wasn't like that in Los Fresnos. I remember being friends with the kids that were next door. Not only do I remember being friends with them, but I remember my parents being friends with their parents. And it was just, it was a small town, but, people were more united. And that's how I was, it was just a small, maybe, it might have been poor. I mean, I personally don't recall ever, suffering much of that. But, I mean, in retrospect, looking back, it might have been poor. But all I remember, though, is how happy we were, how united we were. And, that's what I enjoyed about it.
So how was the transition? You mentioned that it was difficult to moving to Houston and navigating the big city versus the small city. So what about making friends and the new culture that you encounter in Houston?
Yeah, well, it was a completely different transition, which is hard to believe, right? Because you're like, okay, well, I mean, it's the same country. Not only is it the same country, you're in the same state. But yeah, it was just completely different from what I was accustomed to. For one, my neighborhood wasn't predominantly Hispanic. We had blacks living next door. We had some white people living. So that itself was different in itself. And actually, in specific, our neighbors were African American. So that itself, it played a factor because obviously, because of that, my parents, weren't really friends with those. I mean, they would say hi to them, but it was definitely not a personal relationship. So that itself, in the neighborhood aspect, it was very different for me because living in Los Fresnos, like I didn't have to like wait for my dad to get home to go to the park. I was just free to go out whenever I wanted. Even though I was like 7 years old, I was just there was like that security of like you being able to go out when you're 7 years old. In Houston, I was 11, 12 years old, and my mom wouldn't let me go out, and that's because that's how it was. Like it was for my own good. And
do you believe there was a reason behind that? Why your mom wouldn't let you?
yes, well, the reason might have been that my mom just probably herself was getting used to it. And it was also definitely that she, a mom always knows, she always tells me this, that a mom always knows what's best for her son. And she just, it might have been that, the bad influence that were around my neighborhood, people that were older than me, people that might have gotten into the wrong groups. And it was just maybe my mom, not having enough trust in the neighborhood. So that transition for me as a kid was very difficult, and for that reason, like all the friends I made had to be in school, which was, as you know, difficult going into middle school because I went to a middle school that was a middle school and elementary school combined, so all the kids from my school already knew each other, and when they would ask me where I was from, they would know nothing about my town. They wouldn't even know, like if I were to tell them, it's close to Brownsville, they're like, what? They wouldn't know anything about it. So finally when I told them it was close to Mexico, they just were like, okay, you're Mexican, and they would make jokes about it. And also, they had different interests, like usually, like living in Los Fresnos, like all the kids that I grew up with, like we knew about the places, we knew what to talk about, and it was just, I couldn't relate to any of these kids from Houston. So it was very difficult to make friends. I didn't really make friends till I was like in 7th grade.
What kind of jokes or situations do you encounter when moving to Houston?
Yeah, so this is like 2008, 2009. I remember in particular during 2009, I think there was an epidemic in Mexico called the swine flu, and it was very big, even for us. I mean, in 6th grade, by that point, you're already old enough to know right from wrong. And, kids, they liked making jokes about it. So anyways, I was on MySpace, and, I would obviously I'm not going to say I didn't make jokes about people. I did. But I would make jokes about people, and in retaliation, they would make jokes about me. So I remember in particular, this one kid just put it on MySpace that, I started that I have the swine flu and that I started it. And then it's kind of silly to like specify the details on it, but there was a song also, I think it was called Blame It, and Blame It by T-Pain, and they would just say, blame it on Juan. And they were just like, everybody like got into it, like everybody in the class knew about it. I pretended not to be offended by it, that I started the swine flu, or that joke. I pretended not to care about it, but in reality, like it just wouldn't stop. It was like 2 weeks, and they were still into it, and for the rest of the year, I was just known as that, and it was just, it might have been funny to them, but to me, I really didn't find humor in that.
What was the relationship between the swine flu and your nationality or your culture? Because it doesn't, I mean, for the viewers to clarify, what is the relationship between, swine flu and the joke? Yeah,
so the swine flu was a flu. I don't know where. I'm not a medical expert on it. I don't know the specific details on it, but it was a flu that was very deadly in Mexico. It might have killed a couple of people there, and there was just a hysteria there with that. People were very paranoid. They were like, okay, we gotta wash our hands. Everybody was just. People were even. I think people in Mexico were at this time wearing masks. That's how serious it was. It was just a hysteria here, kind of that existed like 3 years ago with people from Africa with Ebola. I don't want to say it was the Mexican Ebola because that's inappropriate scientifically to say. But yeah, the hysteria was, there was just a hysteria about getting a deadly flu. It was around 2009. It was on for a couple of months. And people were paranoid about it, but there were also those people that make jokes about it. So I guess the relationship was that from my country, well, Mexico isn't really my country, but the relationship was that, that Mexicans started it, and it might have been the case that it originated from Mexico. So that was probably the case. And since the kids that I grew up with, from my middle school, they didn't know that I was from here, from Texas. Because remember, I would tell them I'm from Brownsville, I'm from Los Fresnos, they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So when I told them I'm from close to the border, they just reinterpreted that to mean like, oh, you're from the border, you're Mexican. So that's where that joke started. And that's how it's related to my country, because it originated from Mexico and just the hysteria that was there. I hope that answers the question.
So after that encounter with this microaggression, and at this age, as you moved forward in school, did you encounter any more situations that you found that were kind of related to your color, to your origin, to the way you speak, the way you conduct yourself?
Yeah, so there was another thing that I probably forgot to mention. When I first moved here, my English wasn't as good as the other kids' English. Not only that, the Spanish also wasn't the same. And the reason I say that is because most of the jokes were actually being made by people that look like me, which is kind of strange. It wasn't really to say like white kids making fun of me. It wasn't. Might have been some black kids here and then, but it was mainly Hispanic kids that were taking part of these jokes. And it was mainly those that I hung out with, that were friends with me in lunch. So while that was a joke, they really didn't like push it on me that much to the point where I got like bullied to like so bad about it. I was still friends with them. We still played soccer together. We still played basketball together. But at the same time, that joke was still there. So they were still friends with me. I remember that the 6th grade summer 2009, in middle school, when you have a summer and you come back the next summer, it's like a different thing. So I guess by 7th grade, they just completely forgot about it. So that's the only difference that happened between 6th and 7th grade, was just that summer that they forgot about. And another thing, this was also very different from me, because usually in my summer breaks in Los Fresnos, I would keep in touch with my friends. And my summer breaks here in Houston, I wouldn't see my friends till the school started. So I didn't see those guys for 3 months, and that's maybe what helped me just move on from that. But apart from that, I didn't encounter anything else like that was actually like me, like a mass crowd doing it. No.
So you didn't see any kind of like teachers treating you differently just because the way you looked, or just because the way you spoke, or do you ever encounter a teacher, or maybe someone else's parents, or someone on the street that it was apparent that they had an issue with who you were?
Yeah, so there might have been some teachers that asked me where I was from, but when they asked me, they obviously knew about it. They weren't like the kids who were like, oh, I don't know where that's at. So they kind of left it alone. And as far as there being other parents that are other people in the store, no. And that's only because, again, this is the culture here, I guess, in Houston, is that, and this might be the culture in Austin too, I don't know, or in Dallas, I'm pretty sure it is similar, that you really don't go out and interact with people like that, on a personal level like that. So for the reason that I didn't really interact with people, for that reason, maybe that's why the opportunity didn't present itself for that to happen to me by anybody who wasn't in school.
How was your high school experience?
My high school experience, by this time I'm already acquainted with the culture here in Houston, which is much more than just, just being like from Houston. Like people from Houston like to listen to certain music. They like to, just basically the music part, which is big because they take really big pride in it. But I guess what I mean to say by that is by the time I'm in high school, I'm already fitting in with everybody here. So I didn't have any difficulties getting bullied or getting harassed by any students. By this time, I'm already fitting in. My high school experience was actually very great. I did very well academically, and I did very well like personally, like meeting people. So my high school experience was not like my middle school experience.
And moving forward to your college experience so far, have you seen any changes to your experience? You know, it sounds like you had a pleasant time during high school, and moving to college. Did that change, or has been a smooth transition?
Yeah, so that's the best part. That during college, the transition has been even better. My college experience has been even better than my high school experience on a personal level, on me meeting new people. And that's because in my university, I go to an HBCU, a Texas Southern University. And for once, like I was actually a minority in that school, and you know that. But not only, I mean, that's not really important there. What's important in going to an HBCU is how united the students are compared to like bigger institutions like UT or UH in Houston. I've gotten to know professors on a personal level, my classmates. We all help each other. We all know each other very well. But the best part about my school is that I've gotten to meet a lot of people from, I have a lot of African American friends, but I've also gotten an opportunity to meet people from other parts that are predominantly, from other parts of the world that are predominantly black. For example, I have some friends from Jamaica, from the Bahamas. I think I have another friend from a country named Guyana, which is in South America. And I have tons of friends through playing soccer from Nigeria, from Cameroon. I even have from South Africa. These are all students that have just recently moved to the United States. So I'm not comparing my experience to theirs, but just the fact that, you know, we're all come from different parts of the world and we're able to interact, that itself has been an opportunity that I wouldn't give back for anything. Like, I've enjoyed meeting people from different parts of the world, and that's what I've enjoyed most about my school, just meeting people from different parts of the world and seeing that, wow, even though you're from here, we have a lot in common. So that's what I've enjoyed about my school more than anything.
So do you think, given the story that was told, that you told about, you know, this experience with the swine flu and making jokes and all that, that was targeted against you because, you know, they thought you were from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think racism plays a part in people's age and maturity? Because those were kids, right? Those were, yeah. So you were kind of like young to fully understand racism. But as people age, do you think people keep those same beliefs?
You know, I heard a saying the other day that, you know, people throughout time, they don't really change. They just become more of who they are. I think as it relates to racism, that might be the case, because I actually, you know, they might have, those kids at that time might have just done it as a joke, right? But, you know, I actually know them now. I still talk to them. I'm not in bad terms with them or anything. And they would every now and then just still make jokes about it. You know, I guess in their case, they just saw it as a joke and didn't think about it being offensive to anybody else. It may, and you know, the most disappointing part is that they were Hispanic doing that. But I think, as you know, now that they grew older, they definitely. I mean, they might still make jokes about it. I don't know, but they kind of do. But they kind of understand that. I'm pretty sure now they understand that, you know, with the current racial tensions in this country, you know, I hope they have come to their senses and realized that, you know, we're better united than divided, you know. But basically, to answer your question, I don't know if that's the case. That, you know, I do believe in that saying that I said initially, that people, as they grow older, they just become more of who they are. I just, as it relates to racism, I don't know if it's something that you grow out of it or not. I wish I could answer that question, but I don't think I have the answer to it.
So, do you have anything else that you would like to add at this point?
Yes. Anything else that yes. So being I haven't touched on this subject as much. Being a Mexican American is tough because it's tough in terms of not fitting in. What I mean by that is that you don't fit in with, you're not, they call it in Spanish, they have a saying for it. They say, tú ni eres de aquí ni de allá, which means you're not from there or you're not from over there. So, at that, being a Mexican American, you're not American enough to be American, and you're not Mexican enough to be Mexican. And the interesting part is that any Mexican American watching this will probably agree with this, is that when you go to Mexico, people over there know that you're not from Mexico just by looking at you. And they themselves would also kind of feel, they would already have some perception of you. They would obviously kind of probably even make jokes about you, even go as far as doing that. So I think as far as an identity, as far as us having our own identity, I think that's a dilemma right now. And, for the reason that we're not American enough to be American, we're not Mexican enough to be Mexican. So, I wish there was a more of a solution to it. But it's just something that I keep in mind, It's just something that I keep in mind, and I hope, my viewers could probably keep in mind too.
How has that belief affected your identity?
It affected my identity in terms of me, okay, so for example, it affected my identity in terms of what I do, when I do certain activities, for example, play basketball, play football, I'm like, okay, should I be doing this? I'm like, I'm not American, but I am. Okay, but whenever I want to do stuff that's Mexican, whether it's dancing or listening to Mexican music, it kind of leaves me in between. It kind of leaves me in the middle. It affected my identity. I personally feel that you should be on one side. So it's affected my identity in terms of I don't know which side to choose. Should I be American? Should I go for Mexican side? So that's my main problem, that I've been having a hard time choosing which side to go with. So that's my main dilemma.
Does that affect your relationships with people? Who do you choose to hang out with?
Oh, definitely. So for that reason, as I mentioned before, there's certain activities that I reevaluate, should I be doing this, that's kind of what they call, that's co-cultural. So sometimes outside of school, I am selective. I'm like, okay, maybe I should only hang out with friends that are from Mexico. I hang out with them, and I have a hard time conversating with them. Okay, maybe I should hang out with American friends, and I hang out with them, and I have a hard time relating to them. And then I hang out with other Mexican American friends, but they are also kind of committed to just being American. I guess they don't see a problem with that. Maybe because they don't go to Mexico as often as I do. So the fact that I do go to Mexico, I kind of got exposed to that side. So they don't see a problem with that. So my Mexican American friends basically act like Americans. So it's definitely made me selective in terms of because I have to I feel as a Mexican American, going to Mexico and going to the United States very often, I feel like I have to pick a side in order, just for the sake of my own identity, and I sometimes I am selective as far as who to hang out with, who I choose to. But yeah, it has probably affected my personal life a little bit, just in terms, because that's probably how valuable an identity is.
When people see this video in the future, what do you hope they get out of it, out of your story?
Well, main takeaway hopefully they could get from my story is that, hopefully that, that they realize, you know, that what I'm saying is true, that, you know, you might be labeled as Mexican American, but, you know, there's another world to it. Like, if you go to Mexico, you're not Mexican enough to be Mexican. For example, I went to Wyoming. That's like the heart of America, and I definitely didn't fit in there. So what I hope my viewers get out of it is you know, hopefully they could come up with hopefully by then there's probably a solution to our own identity. And I just hope like my viewers are aware that you know, that perception of them exists, because I'm not the only one that has it. I just want my viewers to know that they have a perception of them in Mexico and they have a perception of them in the United States, and it's maybe our responsibility to try to like find a solution for that identity.